You're tuned in to News Now on KFUG Community Radio 101.1 FM and streaming online at kfugradio.org. This co-production between KFUG, the Rivers Outpost, and Redwood Voice is bringing you the latest happenings right here in Delaware County. On tonight's stories, staff at Delaware Unified School Districts are rallying in a shared disdain for how the district is handling school safety in the midst of the pandemic, to the point that a staff strike is potentially on the table. In other news, a few updates on the fires. US 199 is reopened with some delays and the closure of national forests according to the US Forest Service. For a large project I had the pleasure of releasing last week, I discussed the Saga of the California Endowment Billboard, a report documenting all of the events that took place surrounding that story. Something to tune into at your own leisure. For KFUG Community Radio, I'm Persephone Rose, and I'm joined by Avi Kretz. First things first, the COVID-19 update, news on the COVID situation as it stands right now, like you've come to expect. This information was written and valid as of September 22nd, so be aware of any changes that may have come since then. Upon writing this, there have been a total of 138 confirmed cases in Delaware County. That is up 14 since our last report on News Now, when it was at 124. There are currently 5 active cases. 8,509 tests have been administered. There are currently no hospitalizations, but in total we have experienced 3 hospitalizations throughout the duration of the pandemic. There's been a total of 1 death due to COVID-19 during the pandemic. All of this is according to the information hub on the Delaware County Public Health website. If you would like to further track this information, you can find it at covid19.dnco.org.
US 199 has reopened to two-way traffic between Gasky and Oregon, though the area is still an active fire zone, according to a Caltrans District 1 update on Saturday. From a Caltrans Facebook post, quote, US Route 199 in Delaware County has reopened to two-way traffic at Gasky and extending into Oregon. This area remains an active fire zone with fire crews on site. Prepare for possible delays as fire conditions are ever-changing. Future short-term closures are planned to safely accommodate fire mitigation efforts. We recommend checking quickmap.dot.ca.gov for the latest highway updates before your travel. You can also download the free Quick Map app to your mobile device. Stay tuned on this page for updates, end quote. Crews working the Slater fire are trying to halt its encroachment further west of US 199, and the road continues to be blocked on both sides to allow for firefighter and public safety. At an update on Friday, Mike Granger, Operations Section Chief for the Northern Rockies Incident Management Team 2, said firefighters are using indirect control lines, incorporating bulldozers to manage the blaze near US 199. Granger said, quote, a direct control line is when we have firefighters right on that fire and the digging line right on that fire. Indirect control lines buy us time and allows us to put in those lines. It's a monumental task we're undertaking, and the firefighters are doing a fantastic job, end quote. The Slater fire has grown to an estimated 146,698 acres and is 10% contained as of Friday morning, according to an update on the Delaware Office of Emergency Services Facebook page. The Devil Fire is 7,144 acres and is 7% contained. 18 crews, 123 engines, 31 bulldozers, 28 water tenders, 8 helicopters, and 1,161 personnel are battling the blaze. North of the state line, crews are trying to stop the blaze from moving into Bureau of Land Management lands in the Tequilma area, Granger said. This includes adding 100 acres of burnout on Thursday and adding more containment lines to ensure Tequilma is safe. The Gasky Ranger District's Smith River hotshots are working along Oregon State Route 46, which leads to Oregon Cave's National Monument and Preserve, Granger said. That's an area with active fire, and crews are putting in control lines and dozer lines to protect high-value structures inside the monument, he said. The northern edge of the Slater Fire has retreated to roughly 2.2 miles southwest of the park's boundary and 3.2 miles southwest of the monument's National Historic District as of about 5 p.m. on Thursday. Outdoor sprinkler systems are still trained on the Oregon Cave Chateau and Chalet to guard against embers and other fire threats, according to a monument Facebook post. Access to the National Monument is closed due to the Slater Fire. For current information, call the Illinois Valley Visitor Center at 541-592-4076 from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. through Saturday. Though the fire is still 10% contained, Granger said fire crews added more containment lines in the Happy Camp area. Evacuation orders have been reduced, though Gasky and Big Flat residents remain at Level 1, Be Ready, according to DNUSD. Residents between Pioneer Road and the Oregon State Line are at Level 2 Be Set evacuation orders. HWY residents are no longer under evacuation warnings, according to DNUSD. For more fire information in Del Norte County, call 707-464-0911 from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
The following info is cited from a Wild Rivers Outpost article and delves into important news from the Del Norte Unified School District. Thanks, Jessica. Teachers have thrown out, as one trustee phrased it, the strike card. Classified staff say there's been inadequate training over how to handle students returning to campus amid the COVID-19 pandemic. While he acknowledged the confusion, Del Norte Unified School District Superintendent Jeff Harris said guidelines have shifted considerably since schools shuttered in March over how far apart students should be from each other. Harris also noted that California Department of Public Health guidelines and those provided by the Regional Association of Northern California Health Officers, which include Del Norte County Public Health Officer Dr. Warren Raywalt, also differ. Harris told the DNUSD Board of Trustees, quote, "The Rancho document takes what's in the California Department of Public Health guidelines and regionalizes it for the reality of Northern California counties. Some of those differences were buses. Also, what we had been hearing early on was cohorts had to be groups of 10 or less, and students had to be seated 6 feet apart. The Rancho document states cohorts can be up to a full-size class as long as students can be seated 3 feet or more apart." End quote. Roughly 140 students are expected to return to Del Norte schools on Monday as the district transitions from full learning to bringing small cohorts back into the classroom, according to Harris. Roughly 18 teachers will be working with those students, he said, along with numerous classified staff. However, because of a delay in cleaning supplies and personal protective equipment, bringing small students back into the classroom was delayed by about a week, Harris said. Small groups of special education students, homeless youth, foster youth, English language learners, and other high-need students were expected to be back in the classroom part-time on September 14th. However, Del Norte Teachers Association lead negotiator Paige Thompson, a 5th-grade teacher at Mary Peacock Elementary School, said many DNTA members, which includes teachers, counselors, and other certificated staff, hadn't seen a completed site safety plan. Thompson said, quote, "On Monday evening, the district was still figuring out which students would be invited back into what has now been dubbed Phase 2.1 or 2A. On Monday, we're not entering into a full Phase 2. It's a pre-Phase 2. 1 week before the phase began, we were still figuring out who the students were." End quote. Thompson's colleagues, DNHS teacher Cheryl Bradley and DNTA President Marshall Jones, presented the findings of a survey consisting of 114 participants. According to Bradley, teachers asked if they were aware of clear protocols for masks, sanitation, deep cleaning, physical distancing among their students, and the arrangement of shared spaces. Most replied that they weren't, Bradley said. DNTA also polled teachers using a 1 to 5 scale, with 4 and 5 indicating they'd be willing to strike over the issue, Bradley said. According to Bradley, about 50% indicated that they were willing to strike if students weren't kept safely apart 6 feet or more. More than 70% were willing to strike if students couldn't be kept at least 3 feet apart from each other. More than 75% of the survey's respondents indicated they would be willing to strike if students weren't required to wear masks or if masking requirements weren't enforced. Classified staff, for their part, hadn't been notified whether students would return to campus on September 14th when their union representatives met with district administrators roughly 6 days prior, said Sarah Mitchell, vice president of the California School Employees Association Great Northern 178 chapter. District administrators told CSEA representatives on September 15th that small cohorts of students were coming back on Monday, Mitchell said. After that meeting, CSEA representatives tried to find out if individual campuses had been finalized and reviewed with staff. Mitchell said. They tried to find out what meal and recess procedures would be and who would staff them. Mitchell said classified staff also asked what transitioning into Phase 2 would mean for after-school and preschool programs. Mitchell said classified staff who work with special education students had hoped to receive more information from DNUSD administrators on Wednesday, but left that meeting with more confusion. Quoting her, "District administration came into that meeting without an agenda. They did not guide that meeting in an informational way. We have worked so hard. We do want to bring students back, but it is not fair to use us as guinea pigs and have us create these procedures of safety as we're doing it." End quote. Harris acknowledged the need for having protocols in writing. School principals are continuing to work on district-wide pandemic plans and have received input over the summer. That pandemic plan meets state and local health guidelines, he said. He said the pandemic plan meets with Raywalt's approval. However, while he's required to advise, the public health officer isn't required to approve the plan. According to Harris, however, the plans are different at each school. He noted that Mary Peacock Elementary School is predominantly indoors, while Redwood is predominantly outdoors. Crescent Elk Middle School is both indoors and outdoors and has 2 stories. The plans for each school site addresses what restrooms can be used, how students are entering and exiting the building. Harris said that while he feels the burn in getting 18 teachers and classified staff back into the classroom, many of the issues will be more relevant when the district brings larger groups of students back on October 5th as it transitions into Phase 3. District 3 representative on the DNUSD Board of Trustees, Frank Magarino, said he was bothered at Bradley's throwing out the strike card. Before Jones's DNTA report, Magarino said he had been speaking with parents whose kids are regressing and aren't getting the education they're entitled to. According to him, quote, "We're 6 months into this, figuring out and negotiating, dealing with a lot of common sense stuff. Our community is dying on the vine. Kids are regressing. We need to plow through and be very vigilant about staying safe because we can't continue this pernicious road that we're on. I figured it out. I don't understand why we need to negotiate this stuff." End quote. Jones responded to Magarino saying he doesn't want to strike. Jones asked, quote, "What other means do we have to get the point across that leadership has failed us? That we could have sat down in June and solved these problems, and then we could have come in and be safe. When my kids show up, when and if we bring these kids back, I don't have a protocol as to where I'm supposed to be. Am I supposed to be in my room waiting for my kids to show up, or am I supposed to be waiting out there for 250 kids to show up? Hopefully we can still work this out in a way that is going to be safe for all." End quote. District 4 trustee Charlene Mazie said it's reasonable for people to ask how to keep their workplace safe. Noting that she has a special education student who is expected to be in school on Monday, Mazie said the district should come up with a decision on the nuts and bolts on how far students have to be and how teachers and classified staff should proceed with in-person learning. She said, "If site principals are still working on a site plan that's comprehensive enough, then they need to be persuaded to speed it up a little bit. Because as a parent, I still haven't received information as to what my child is going to be expected to do when he goes to school." End quote. In addition to Jones, several other teachers chastised Magarino for his comments regarding the need for negotiations and training on how to bring kids back in the classroom safely. 4th grade teacher Kelly James, in particular, called out Magarino for insisting that things return to normal as soon as possible. James said, quote, "I feel like this is our bridge moment. My entire life I've been told, 'Oh, Kelly, if everyone was standing on a bridge and jumping off, would you?' And the answer is always supposed to be no. But I'm watching all of you, and Frank, you're leading the way, jumping off into a pool of hopes and wishes." End quote. DNUSD began the 2020-21 school year on August 31st with full online learning. It's expected to transition into Phase 3, a blended learning model incorporating both in-classroom learning and distance learning in cohorts not to exceed 50% of the total class on October 5th. This is dependent on the availability of supplies, including hand sanitizers, disinfecting sprays and wipes, and personal protective equipment such as gloves and masks, Harris said.
200 sixth graders received their own Chromebooks last week from an organization seeking to breach the digital divide. But for many Del Norte students, that divide still exists due to a global shortage in devices starting at the raw material phase, according to Ryan Botten, Del Norte Unified School District's Director of Information Network Services. DNUSD hadn't had enough devices for each student going into the COVID-19 pandemic and began placing orders in the spring. This includes 800 Chromebooks Botten said he ordered in June that were expected to arrive in August and never showed up. Adding that the shortage in Hewlett-Packard devices is global, Botten told the Rivers Outpost, quote, "Unfortunately, that August expectation has now been pushed to December, and that's straight from HP," end quote. DNUSD students began schooling on August 31st, learning via Zoom, Google Classroom, and other online learning management systems. The school district had planned on transitioning to Phase 2 on its 4-stage Continuum of Learning model on September 14th, bringing small groups of its most highest-need students back into the classroom. However, due to a lack of disinfecting supplies and personal protective equipment, due in part to the Slater fire, according to DNUSD Superintendent Jeff Harris, that transition was pushed to Monday, September 21st. DNUSD's Phase 3, or blended learning model, will kick in for kindergartners through 8th graders on October 5th. Parents can also have their students engage in online learning only, regardless of which learning phase the district is in. Del Norte High School students will stay in Phase 2 of the district's learning continuum. At the elementary school level, families that can are making do with what they have at school, enabling the district to reallocate devices from its K-8 schools to Del Norte High School, Botten said. Quote, "We're still short a few hundred, there's no way around that. I've basically put out all my feelers, talked to every possible vendors, even the ones I haven't historically used," end quote. Office Depot is one of those vendors. A partner with the California Department of Education, the office supply retailer is hoping to make 50,000 11.6-inch HP Chromebooks available for delivery at the end of September, according to the CDE's overview of available purchase programs. Botten said he's placed an order with Office Depot and was told devices may arrive in Del Norte County as soon as October. Botten has also ordered more iPads, which are used in the transitional kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade classes. He hopes they'll arrive in late September or early October as well. Last week, every 6th grader at Crescent Elk Middle School received a Chromebook courtesy of the California Emerging Technology Fund, a nonprofit corporation created when the California Public Utilities Commission approved the mergers of SBC AT&T and Verizon MCI in 2009. As a result of that merger, the companies were required to contribute $60 million over 5 years to give underserved communities better access to broadband. This year, Del Norte County was one of the 17 in California to receive CEFT dollars, which supports technology for middle and high school students within Frontier Communications coverage area. In a video addressed to the community, Harris said a number of students and families in the area aren't able to access the internet. That challenge is exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Though the broadband gap in Del Norte County has been discussed for decades, COVID-19 has brought that challenge to the forefront. The district is looking to distribute nearly 4,000 devices to its students, but breaching that gap is more difficult to solve, Botten said. The school district has spent grant money to bring more reliable internet to the schools in outlying communities, such as Margaret Keating Elementary School in Klamath, but, he noted, that doesn't help families access the internet at home. Families in remote areas of the county, such as Low Divide Road, deal with spotty internet, but so do those living in Smith River, Botten said. For some families, internet access is simply unaffordable. Botten also said, quote, "I hesitate to say this, but unfortunately, I've had a lot of tears this year, even myself with families. They want nothing more than to make sure their child gets the best education as possible, and we want the same thing," end quote. As part of the Chromebook distribution at Crescent Elk, families could sign up for Frontier Fundamental Internet, a $20 a month service, according to DNUSD's news release. Meanwhile, in the 3 weeks since school started, Botten said he and his team of 5 IT technicians have been fielding more than 100 calls for technology-related help each day. In the first 2 days of school, DNUSD's IT staff had received 700 calls, he said. Despite the challenges, Botten said, families, students, and staff are understanding and flexible. As parents of the district's highest needs students prepare to send their youngsters back to campus, Botten reminds them to bring their devices with them and to make sure they're charged. Up until COVID-19, the district's devices would be in charging carts when students weren't using them, Botten said. However, the district's unable to provide enough extension cords for everyone in the classroom to charge their devices at the same time. He said, quote, "This is a crucial piece of education, so you need to bring it with you as you would bring your book in your book bag," end quote.
And now, a segment from Redwood Voice. What I'm going to be talking about is enough of a story that I could have slapped the recording down here and let it act as its own enormous segment, but that would be cheating. Instead, I'd like to point you towards an important work of mine that has recently been released. Over the past several newscasts, there have been recurring updates all surrounding a similar theme. First District Supervisor Roger Gitlin, racism, tensions, the California Endowment Billboard, vandalism, and an anti-racism rally. If you missed even just one of those, or haven't been keeping super close attention on them, then it would be incredibly easy for you to be lost in the midst of that ever-developing story. That's why I took it upon myself to take all of those moments, the entirety of the story of the California Endowment Billboard, and wrote it into a report start to finish. The start being Supervisor Roger Gitlin's beginning incitement of hate speech from the infamous misattributed to Franklin Graham speech, up to the California Endowment Billboard being replaced by the billboard that sits in its place right now. Whether you know the story, parts of it, or have no idea what I'm talking about, I heartily recommend checking it out. It is titled The Saga of the CalEndow Billboard, How We Got Here, on the Redwood Voice YouTube channel, and as the title suggests, it tells the story of how, exactly, we got to where we are now. It includes a linear timeline and all of the strange details sandwiched in between, documenting the event for the future so that it may not be forgotten. Despite it being in the early stages of getting views, I noticed already that a discussion was forming in the comments section. Unfortunately, the conversation revolved around Crescent City being comparable to a sundown town. While it is sad to acknowledge the kind of tragedy and racism that exists within our very own community, it is very important to know that it is there. You cannot fix a problem that you cannot see, that you do not know is there. Watch it for yourself, add to the discussion, have a conversation. Racism is not welcome in our community, let alone coming from a public official engaged in a dangerous behavioral cycle that I explore further in the report. For all Redwood Voice-based links, you can find our link tree, linktr.ee/Redwood Voice, or honestly, if you just search Redwood Voice online somewhere, you'll find us. Thank you.
Though hunting season is opening, national forests in California remain closed due to wildfires across the region. From the U.S. Forest Service website, quote, "Currently all forests in the Pacific Southwest region are closed due to the severe fire situation. These closures were put in place to protect the public and our employees. Forest Service closure orders include an exemption for persons with a Forest Service non-special use written authorization to conduct non-recreational activities, such as harvesting timber or forest products or grazing livestock. However, this exemption does not apply to hunting. Hunting is considered and managed as a recreational public use of forests. All forests are currently closed to protect the public and our employees due to the unprecedented fire season and the additional risks associated with extreme fire weather and fast-moving fire conditions throughout the state. Opportunities to hunt and utilize tags may be alternatively available on non-Forest Service lands. Additionally, we are assessing the fire situation and closure decision on a daily basis in order to make a determination to retain the forest closures or to remove them. It is possible, depending on fire behavior and weather, the closures may be lifted before hunting season concludes." End quote.
The following info is cited from a Wild Rivers Outpost article and delves into important news from the Solid Waste Authority. Thanks, Jessica. Local solid waste representatives and Recology Del Norte are seeking a consultant as they work on extending the Waste Haulers Collections franchise agreement for 5 years. The consultant will be paid for by the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority and Recology Del Norte. They will help both parties renegotiate garbage rates and potentially accelerate the process of replacing rusty street-side recycling and trash containers, said Director Ted Ward. Ward estimated the consultant would cost between $8,000 and $20,000 depending on the level of detail they're asking them to engage in. The DNSWMA and Recology will each contribute half of the consultant's fees. The consultant would prepare and present a report on the recommended garbage rate changes. Ward said, quote, "It's perfectly understandable as rates change that every customer would be concerned to make sure rates are fair and reasonable. It's clear the community would like some discussion to explain how the rates were arrived at," end quote. Ward told commissioners he would present them with a request for proposals at the Joint Powers Authority's next meeting. This decision comes roughly a year after Recology Del Norte General Manager Jeremy Herber asked the authority to begin discussing an extension to its collections contract. As part of that extension, Recology would replace 60 street-side metal containers with cement, trash, and recycling containers. When Herber made this request in September 2019, the DNSWMA board appointed Crescent City Mayor Blake Inscore and Public Representative Mike Tompkins to an ad hoc committee to negotiate a contract extension with Recology. Ward said Inscore and Tompkins felt working with a consultant to assist with the negotiations would be a good idea. However, District 2 Supervisor Lori Cowan, who has been a DNSWMA commissioner for about 4 years, asked if a consultant is really necessary to come up with new garbage collection rates. Ward noted that in 2011, when the Solid Waste Management Authority entered its original agreement with Recology to offer residential trash pickups, there were changes to the rate structure. Inscore noted that with garbage rates being renegotiated, there will be systemic changes to the DNSWMA's contract with Recology. He said, quote, "My thought is having an independent party between the two of us might enable us to stay on point and to get to conclusions without having to go back and forth over minutia. Sometimes it just seems like we get waylaid over a specific topic and we have another meeting about that, and we just don't make the necessary progress. My thought is having an independent person we're paying that both sides agree upon. This person is there to keep us on task and on point to get this job done." End quote. Cowan said she was okay with spending $8,000, but didn't like the $20,000 estimate. In other matters, the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority agreed to invite Cal Recycle to visit the area to conduct a waste characterization study. This study analyzes the types of material being and are used to project the amount of items being discarded and what could potentially be recovered, Ward said. The last time such a study was performed in Del Norte County was 1997. Ward added that Cal Recycle particularly hopes to conduct an analysis in a rural area.
The following is a statement from the Yurok Tribal Police Department. The Yurok Tribal Police Department is working with the Del Norte County Sheriff's Office to investigate a shooting in Klamath that happened on Sunday morning. At approximately 9 a.m., a dispute between roommates resulted in a shooting. Officers from the Yurok Tribal Police Department were able to respond quickly, and the suspect in the case, who called to 911 to report the incident, has been arrested. They are currently being booked into the Del Norte County Correctional Facility. The victim in the shooting is currently alive, although their medical condition is unknown at this time. This is an active investigation, and there is no ongoing danger to the community.
Thanks again for tuning in to News Now. To hear more episodes of our newscast, check out kfugradio.org or our YouTube channel. Special thanks to Wild Rivers Outpost and Jessica Sanar, Crescent City Bureau Chief, for providing great content. Tune in 2 weeks from now to KFUG Community Radio 101.1 FM or stream online at kfugradio.org to hear more news from your favorite local radio station. This newscast was edited by Persephone Rose. The voices of this newscast were Persephone Rose and Avi Kretz.